She's got 5 points. I'll just read her 5 points very briefly. Work hard to get noticed for the right reasons. Try to identify where a company website might need you. She spoke about maybe video material they will need. STV's local websites certainly do need that. Identify that need and offer to fill it. You may not get paid in the first instance, and there's a principle there that not everyone's comfortable with. But nonetheless, it's worth doing. It's worth just putting yourself out there. Use social media, which wasn't available when I was around, but that is a very easy way to engage with people now. But be careful what you say. Quite clearly, be careful what you say. Another lad said, be active, but be responsible, he said. And employers will look up your social networking. He says your Facebook privacy settings should be absolutely private. You don't want an employer seeing that. And be careful what you say on Twitter. It might seem funny at the time. God knows I suffer from that. But it's worth getting out there. Write blogs, keep in touch with people. If there's journalists you admire, get in touch with them, ask questions, seek advice. We've all been where you've been, so we're more than happy to help you out. I could go on in detail, but I'm not sure. I may then talk about stuff that's of no interest to you, and I think some of you are getting bored even now. So I will I'll take questions and try and warm you up a wee bit. Okay, so do ask questions. Who's all journalists? Give me an idea who's all journalists? Right, okay, so no excuse for no questions then, so just fire away. Who's first? Yeah. Well, I would say in this industry, this profession, the hardest thing is getting in. So however you get in is the best way to do it, frankly. So if it's a newspaper, that's grand. I would say your best grounding for broadcast specifically is radio in the first instance. So Radio Cali, get involved in that, do stuff. Your local radio station, community radio stations, hospital radio stations, all of that. For me, if you want to be a good broadcaster, start in radio and then progress from there. But the other thing is that the industry, the profession is changing quite considerably, and therefore to go into the one discipline may not be the way it is further down the line. So you might want to do TV, but a lot of what you're going to do, I think, once the industry works out how to monetize it, is going to be online. So therefore, it will be, you'll do a bit of writing, you'll do a bit of videoing, you'll do a bit of presentation, you'll need to do the whole gamut. Specific answer to your question, I would focus on the broadcasting, especially radio, as an entry.
How do you feel about the kind of comparison of Scotland and Burgundy?
Well, the thing, see, I'm chuffed. Of course I'm chuffed. The whole Ron Burgundy thing came about because STV is, I'm talking about online, and STV is taking quite a lead in getting online. And they're saying, we need you guys to interact with social networking for people to follow, go to our websites. So how do you do that? Well, you can just tweet news stories, but nobody's that interested because lots of people tweet news stories. So you have to take on something else. And because of the role I have, I can't be that opinionated. I can't really say too much. So it seemed to me an obvious thing would to be the anchorman. So I started tweeting all that Ron Burgundy stuff. And it straight away got a reaction. So that's the reason I do it. I'm now stuck with it. Although I quite enjoy it. I'm more than chuffed that the remake has been made just now. Did anyone see that? The Paul Rudd, the guy who plays the sports guy with his moustache. He's been showing off his moustache. I hope you've all seen that. I mean, what a look. So that was the reason that the whole Ron Burgundy thing started. And as long as there's no confusion between the online persona and the on-air persona, and one needs to be, that's where the total anchor thing. Did anyone get that joke? I thought that was a good line. Total anchor. Anyway, so as long as you don't cross from one into the other, then I think it's okay. Shorthand it's a great skill to have, but you very rarely will you see journalists use it now. Most people have got recording devices. The only time I think it's still particularly useful is in telephone conversations. It's invaluable then, but very, very few people have it. Law, you need to know the law, obviously. I think there's maybe some overemphasis on it. I think most of the legal stuff I know is from, frankly, errors that were made and were picked up by more experienced colleagues. No, you can't do that, you can't do that. So they're all crucial. They're all, shorthand less so, law, you need to know the law clearly, or you are going to get yourself into bother. But my experience has always been, and those that I've watched, has always been, you gain more experience and you learn more on the job. It's pretty much applies to anything that you're doing. But don't think they're not important. And shorthand especially is I would have found, I don't have shorthand, but I would have found shorthand extremely useful.
Did you always have an interest to work in news, or did you have an interest in other news?
Sports was the other area of interest. I was always interested in news. I enjoyed writing. And a teacher said, have you ever thought of being a journalist? And I hadn't thought of being a journalist. But I used to deliver newspapers for a long time and get a real buzz out of delivering. Literally, I mean, you're delivering the news in one sense, and I'm still doing that now, if you like. I've been doing that since I was 8 years of age. So there was a buzz from that. And I've always had that buzz from news, even now. The sport always interested me. I quite fancy being a football commentator, and I did a lot of sports reporting when I worked at the BBC. But I was a sports correspondent for a period of time. But what I found was that when the big news stories were breaking, and I was talking to somebody about their groin strain again, I missed the news. So news has always been my main bag.
How much more multi-skilled would you think you need to be now to be a journalist? Would you say
Yes, you do, but the opportunities are there to do that. You know, when I started, there was. I genuinely started when they were still doing hot metal type. You were hitting typewriters with carbon paper. In fact, the first newsroom I worked in had there was 5, 6 phones at the end of it. You didn't have a phone on your desk. There was cubicles at the end, and secretaries would come and summon you to say there was a phone call for you, or you would go and seek permission from them to use the phone booth. The point is the industry has changed, and in the time that when you come in now, it will change significantly again. Do you have to be multi-skilled? Yes, but a lot of that skill you will already have from your interaction and from being online. You need to have an appreciation of image, you need to understand words, you need to know concision, and you need to know video, clearly. So you need to know a lot, but I think a lot of it you will already have, the basics of it anyway. It got me in. It's as simple as that. Print, as you know, the newspaper industry has not got its troubles to seek. However, I think it will settle down. We probably won't have as many titles as we do now, but there will still always be a demand for print and quality journalism, and people will pay for that. In my case, it was purely it was a grounding to get into broadcasting. That's not how I saw it at the time, I have to say. I envisaged, it was a Sunday Post I worked for, just, where are we? Yeah, just down there. And, no, just up there. Just up there, sorry. But it was, it got me in the door, and I envisaged maybe going to the Evening Times, and for me, the Herald, working the Herald was the big deal. And when I applied for the BBC, I went to, when I was a student, just to give you a wee bit of background in this, as a student I went to, submitted a cassette, as you used to Radio Clyde. And they said, come in for a chat, come in for an interview, and I did. And at the end of the day, I was there for an afternoon, I think, and I became quite relaxed as the day went on, and probably began to talk a wee bit more like that, no? And at the end, they said, forget it, broadcasting's not for you. And they were fairly candid, and I respected that. So I just assumed print was the direction I would go. News traineeship came up at the BBC, and I was curious to see inside the BBC, simple as that. Applied for the job and was surprised to get it. Didn't expect to. So I didn't see a broadcasting career. The answer to your question is the print helped me get in. As I said to you, getting into journalism is the hardest thing. That's where you can maybe start making your leaps. But it wasn't essential. I could have potentially gotten somewhere else. I've never had professional, no, never. Again, it's been learning on the job. And again, radio, who we're talking to about radio. Radio there's a crucial part of that. Because on radio, it's only the voice. The visual doesn't matter. And so you listen back to yourself and you can hear, and nobody likes hearing their own voice. Nobody likes it. I still don't. I don't like seeing myself on TV or anything. That's something you have to get over. It's just a reality. This is part of what you do. So listen to yourself when you're on radio. And listen and be absolutely candid with yourself. How does that compare to what you hear elsewhere? And you will hear yourself where your flaws are, and that's what you should start to pick up. The only one time that I had a formal voice training, it was at the BBC, and the guy who came was he was an Austrian Jew who had a very heavy German accent. And I asked him his story, and he basically mentioned his family had experienced the Holocaust. And we spent my entire 40 minutes, I think it was, talking about his family experience in the Holocaust. We didn't do any actual formal voice training. But he was a fascinating guy. So, no formal training. And I go back to that. I'm not sure everybody who's in journalism or who teaches journalism would agree with me necessarily. But for me, all the learning, all the training that matters is when you actually do the job, for me. It's about broadcasting to the nation. It's yeah, we've got essentially 3 outlets a day. We've got a lunchtime bulletin. No, in fact, we've got more now. We've got daybreak in the morning. But I do the lunchtime, the evening, and Scotland Tonight 2 nights a week. So I don't really have much time to report, as it were. I tend to sometimes do set-piece reports, and I'll certainly do set-piece interviews. But in terms of actually going out and regular news gathering, as they now call it. I don't quite know where that phrase came from, but that's a new phrase in recent years. Gathering news, editing it, and broadcasting it. I don't do so much of that. And actually miss that a wee bit, because that was part of the buzz. Getting the information, getting the interview, hitting your deadline. Yeah, of course. Well, there's a kind of historic thing to that. It's a government initiative, essentially. And it was initially put out that the money would be available and certain companies went for it because they would access funding. There is a drive towards local coverage. We do STV itself on our website, STV Local. And my personal opinion is that I'm not convinced yet that there's a demand for that. But if that demand builds, we're in a very good position to take advantage of it. Specifically, whether I think STV Glasgow or STV Edinburgh is a good idea or not, it's there. So you make the most of that you can. And it won't be funded to the same level as broadcasting will be. So we will be relying on students and others to, that was the whole idea of the concept anyway, to contribute ideas and to contribute their skills, get involved. Any newsroom is going to have rumblings about anything, but it's there. It's going to happen next April, I think we're launching. Get involved, absolutely.
You worked for the BBC for several
Yeah.
years.
They're both admirable companies. The BBC, you change, moving from BBC to STV, you change the culture of bureaucracy for the culture of accountancy. STV is a commercial company, it needs to justify its pennies. That has happened more recently at the BBC, but the BBC's problem was always bureaucracy, and still is, levels of middle management whose function is, I'm still not entirely clear about. BBC is a great institution. I think we should be very proud of it. I'm not convinced it's maybe as effective as it could be, and I would say that's not because of the people that work there, but it's still got this bureaucratic structure. STV is very fast-moving, can react very quickly, but you do that within a cost squeeze at times. One big difference I noticed moving from BBC to STV. BBC, if you wanted a camera crew to go out and film something, you had to go to a desk of 3 people, tended to have to fill out a form. STV, it was one guy, when do you want a camera, son, was essentially what it was. So I thought that was a huge leap. Where BBC, so that was great. In terms of news, I prefer STV. It suits me better, it's faster, it's more reactive. As an organisation, you probably had more opportunities to progress and do other things in BBC, sport, for example. You could, I remember doing a youth programme once. I did a youth programme once, which I wouldn't have been able to do at STV. But it was all good experience. Well, in terms of, I didn't expect to do this job, so I never actually dreamt about it. You know, it wasn't. There are people who will come in and say they want to be a presenter, and I'm always wary of that because no, you need to be something before you do that. You need to have something to back it up. So in terms of journalism, I really enjoy my job. I get a great buzz from it. Part of the issue I found as an on-the-road reporter was you were very focused on your own story, but at the end of the day, you weren't entirely sure everything else that had been happening, whereas in my role now, I'm across everything. There's also that buzz of live broadcasting at the end of each day. But there will come a point, clearly, when somebody will tap me in the shoulder and say, right, we've had enough of you. Although I see in the States, of course, that there's a lot of grey-haired men who present the news there, so you never know. Stick around. I enjoy what I do. That's as much as I can say. I didn't dream of it, but I enjoy it, and I think we're in a very exciting period just now. Probably the most exciting period since I've been in journalism in this country, and that's been quite a long time now. There was periods when there were really big stories. There was Lockerbie, there was Dunblane, but in terms of just general journalistic excitement, and that might not come across to everybody because they might be finding the debate dull, but this independence referendum is a hugely exciting period for us all in this industry, I would say.
If you were to teach a team of young journalists now, what would you have them do?
Well, we get a lot of people come in for work experience, and they will go out with reporters, and they will get experience there, and then I will see them looking at Facebook later on in the day. So I try to engage. I will always interact with a student who has arrived for work experience, and you can very quickly tell if they're interested or not. The fact that you're all here suggests you're interested. And a very simple exercise I sometimes get people to do, and it's very simple, is copy 700 words from PA and ask them to sub it down to a 20-second read. It's astonishing how many people can't do that. What have you been doing? So practically, I would emphasise, I don't know what you do in this course. Claire Dean has worked with me for a long time at STV, and I know my understanding is the broadcasting here has improved significantly under Claire. Claire's a very experienced reporter. So not suggesting anything about anyone else's course, for me, practical is everything. You know, how do you get to the front of a scrum? How do you get your information back quicker? How do you write? You know, for example, you've got a very short period of time to gather your information, get your interviews, and get it back for the programme. And then you've got to go back and voice it. So what would you do? Well, I would suggest one way of doing that is do it as an as live. Don't do it as a formal report, do it as an as live. You record everything on site, your own pieces to camera, essentially your voiceover. So that when you come back, if you're struggling to find pictures and time's running out, then you've got your pieces to camera that can fit in. Simple stuff like that. So what would I do is practical, every day, produce bulletins every day, get stories every day, because that's what's going to be expected of you.
Do you find it easy to keep your emotions in check if you're reporting that fairly sad? Or
You do, and experience helps you with that. I mean, there's a terribly sad story today, but well, actually happened last evening. A 2-year-old girl in Aberdeen was knocked down and killed outside her own home. I mean, that's a dreadful story. You never get comfortable with that. But it's experience will get you through all of that. The one that really affected me was Dunblane. I take it you're all familiar with the Dunblane story. And I remember arriving at the school as parents were arriving at the school. You know, so we were heading up. The initial notes came. I'll take it right back. There was a guy, Tim Bugler, I think his name is, a local correspondent in Stirling, was sitting in the local court. It was a regular day, and all of a sudden he saw the police all rush out. What's happened? There's been a shooting at school. 10 kids thought to have been shot, and he put that out in the wires. And that's the bit of paper I went up with to Dunblane. And you're looking at it and think, Dunblane, 10? No, there's clearly a mistake here. This can't be possible. And the only reason we realised it was, the first I realised that there was genuinely something serious, was the cameraman I was driving with undertook a police car on the road up to Stirling, and the police car didn't react. Immediately you think, well, because normally they'd have pulled you over, clearly. But so then you know this is serious. So then you arrive at Dunblane, you see the agony of these parents. In the aftermath and the inquiry, you hear the stories of these parents, you get to know these parents, and you see these kids. And I had young children myself at the time, so that, above anything, has always affected me more emotionally than anything else. And when I was very young, just starting, I remember one of my favourite footballers had passed away very suddenly, and I remember being quite shocked. I had having to read that and finding it quite shocking. But over time, you get to deal with that. But never think, as soon as you start thinking it doesn't matter, just another death or something, as soon as you start thinking that, then maybe a wee bit of the passion for the job is going away. You should always care, but you've got to keep it in check. Yeah.
What's kind of been your favourite thing to cover? Do you prefer covering things like that are more serious, or do you prefer doing something a bit lighthearted?
No, I've always preferred the serious stuff. As much as anything else, there's a certain formula to it. You know what's expected. I was never particularly good at the unfinalies. Some people have not many people can do them very well. There's a guy who works for Daybreak, Nick Dixon. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He used to work at STV. He was a master at unfinalies. He could get an unfinally out of anything. I never really could. I far preferred the straightforward reportage. Court reporting I didn't care for particularly. Some people have got a real gift for court reporting. One couple of guys, I don't know if things may change. You don't tend to do stand-up pieces to camera outside a court, but some guys used to have a technique. They would record their piece to camera, then on a dictaphone. Now you do it on your own phone, and they'd put an earpiece in, and then they would just stand in front of the camera. We had a guy who could do 1.5 minute pieces to camera flawlessly, and how does he manage that? It was actually dull television, but he delivered it very well. And the reason he did it is because he'd recorded it and was just repeating it verbatim through his ear. So all these wee tricks, all that, being out on the road, hitting the deadline, I've always enjoyed that. We on STV Online, we do so many stories about a puppy with a sore leg's been found in the street, and it gets massive hits. That's why we do it. It gets massive interest, but it's really not for me. I mean, puppy. I hope the puppy's okay, but it's really not for me. Yeah. Slowly, read slowly. We, as Scots, we always speak very quickly. So read very slowly, and then when you think you've got it just about right, slow it down a wee bit more. And make sure you have pauses. Pronounce syllables as well. Pronounce each letter. I'm not saying emphasize each letter, but pronounce each letter, because that'll slow you down as well. The pace is everything. Then you can work in emphasis. Typically what happens when people are reading autocue is that when we speak, we tend to speak, and then we rise up, and then we maybe go down at the end. And then we start the next sentence, and we go up, and then we go down at the end. And then we start the next sentence, and we go up, and there's that pattern. That's the way we tend to speak. You don't want to do that in autocue. There's that rhythm, which sounds terrible. Autocue, let me tell you, is not as easy as some people seem to think. Yes, a lot of people think it's a scoosh, let me tell you. There's an art to it, and but pace is the key. Pace will make the difference. Panic. No, these bits of paper that we shuffle at the end, they've got words on them, and the laptop has got words on that, and the running order in that. So we've got things we can go to. It's just a case of putting your head down. And we actually had a guy, Scotland Tonight, Rona, who does Scotland Tonight, the other night. The guy who was doing the autocue literally fell asleep. He'd been a long, long, hard day. I'll not go into the details. And so she started reading. The autocue didn't move, so straight away it was onto the words in front of her. In fact, some discomfort we've got a new guy who started just last week, and I needed some scripts brought into the studio today. So he was bringing them in, and at that time my laptop lid. We should have an iPad, but it'll come. I'm sure we'll get it. But anyway, the lid of the computer kept falling like that, just hitting the deck. So I, in Anchorman nonsense, as the poor boy came in, I said, the laptop's got erectile dysfunction. So the boy comes in, all he heard was erectile dysfunction, and he's like, "It's not part of my job." But these things are all useful. You use all these devices. They're not just props, and you do need something to shuffle at the end of the program. Look, that's very, very important. You need all of that. Yeah, too many to mention actually. Two very briefly. One was way at the beginning of my career. I was working in Radio Orkney for a period of time, which was a lovely experience. But on that particular day, it was comic relief, and all the kids had gone to school wearing the night clothes, and so I was out in Stromness, a beautiful town in Orkney, and interviewing these school kids, and they were telling me what they were wearing and why they were doing it and all the rest of it. So I was self-opping the morning programme. So that means I was doing it on my own. And in the midst of introducing the kids of Stromness, dressing up in the night clothes for comic relief, and off the tape went. And I realised I didn't have my weather. And anybody who's Orcadian or from the islands will know that weather's crucial. You couldn't care less what else you tell them, but make sure you get the weather. It goes back to the change in styles. Then the weather came in a telex machine downstairs, So I ran downstairs to get the weather off the telex machine, waited for it to come in, pulled it off, ran back up to the studio, just as the tape was coming to an end. And the tape was a wee girl. And tell me what you're wearing. So she told me what she was wearing. I had run upstairs. So I'm on my night clothes, I've got my vest. And then it comes off to me going, ah. And there's no recovery from that. I mean, you're finished. I didn't stay there for much longer after. So that wasn't good. But also, on I think St Andrew's Night, 1998, 1999, something like that, we had a new, in STV News, we had a new computer system or a new tape playing system that we'd introduced. And it was St Andrew's Night because we were wearing Lucky White Heather. By God, that was a mistake. So we were on air, and as soon as we went on air, we realised we had major problems. This new system wasn't going to work. Indeed, excuse my language here, but the first words I heard from the producer as we went on air were, "Oh, for fuck's sake." And that's not what you want to hear when you go on it, because you don't swear in the gallery, because if you swear in the gallery, it comes out. It goes in the ear, and the presenters quite often repeat it. So we had to crash off air very, very early. Very sorry, not the standard you might expect, blah, 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 and came off air. And to fill in the 15 minutes or 20 minutes, we put on this programme called Edge of the Land. It's essentially a helicopter ride around Scotland, spectacular pictures. And, excuse me, now that's a fundamental error. I do apologise. Oh, really? Edge of the Land, so we come downstairs very uptight, as you can imagine, and the phones were just going buzzing. With much trepidation, we answered the first phone call, and it was people saying, "What was that programme? That was brilliant. Give us more of that." So that was hugely embarrassing. But it's amazing what the audience let you away with. It's amazing what the audience let you away with and don't notice. Things you think are terrible, they don't really see. Well, if you're doing a live, I never understand reporters learning great wadges of text. I don't see the point in that. For me, if you're doing a live or doing a two-way, break it up with questions. For two reasons. It's a prompt to you. So you'll learn it in smaller sections. And the presenter asking you the question, prompt, all right, that's where I'm going now, that's where I'm going now. And also don't make it too long, because as much as anything else, there are certain circumstances when you're going to have to speak at some length, but by and large, on a news digest at the end of the day, if you're talking for a minute and a half, just standing talking to a camera, unless your story is exceptionally descriptive or you can refer to stuff, it's pretty dull television. Television's all about images and pictures and writing to pictures. So don't write a huge long wad of material. If you can avoid it, keep it fairly brief, and that allows you to memorize it far more easily. Well, I think we recognised the independence referendum was coming. There was a gap for it. With the greatest of respect, Newsnight Scotland doesn't really. With the greatest of respect, Newsnight Scotland. I'll leave it there, okay? But not that I think we're in competition. I think we're complementary, genuinely, because there's a huge appetite for what's going on, and it's worthwhile that we have these programmes that can discuss it. But I think they just thought there's a gap there, and how best to do it. What's not just in terms of political discussion, current affairs discussion, but in terms of style as well. We came in. This is what we should do. This fits us well, and it's been a great success because of that. I think people like the relaxed style. You know, we allow people to answer the questions. We assume the intelligence of the audience, and that they can make their own mind up based on what individuals are saying. So Scotland Tonight was, I suppose at the beginning, just testing the water, but it's been very successful both in terms of audience, in terms of critical feedback, and in terms of social interaction. So it's gone very well.
How do you think that independence, if it were to happen, would affect the industry?
Well, you'll be aware that the SNP have long wanted broadcasting to be devolved to Scotland. In the event of a yes vote, that would clearly have to happen. And where it would go, the BBC is the big issue, because obviously that's a UK organisation. State broadcaster, some might say. I wouldn't say it was a state broadcaster, but feel free to say that if you want. We're the lively independent channel. But where it would go, I think it's a good question because I don't think anybody specifically knows the answer to that. I suppose Ireland's a good model. You know, you get the Irish Times, you get quality newspapers, you get its own RTE, for example. Now, I'm not familiar with them. I don't see them, but I suppose you would have more of that sort of thing, very specifically Scottish. There's a big argument, as you know, for the Scottish Six that's run for a long time. Essentially, that if you watch the news, both on ITV and on the BBC, you'll get stories on English education, English and Welsh education. You get stories on various issues that are of no relevance to Scotland. Now, they're quite right to do that because 9/10 of their audience want to see that. But as a Scot, then you think, well, that's irrelevant to me. Some people aren't bothered by that, but a lot of people are exercised by that, and they would prefer to have a Scottish Six in which all the international, UK, Scottish stories are all come directly from Scotland, not via London. You would see something in that. A Scottish Six, I would think, would be an obvious example. But a lot of these questions we don't know yet. It depends, and it depends on the story and when it's filed. I typically will. You try to see every story. Sometimes some of the scripts are gobbledygook if it's been written really late. I had a piece on hearts today which came in very, very late, and I think the Gorgie side was mentioned about 3 times in 20 seconds. It was very hurriedly put together, which goes back to what I'm saying to you earlier on about practical stuff. Keep practicing the practical thing. Typically, you would have most scripts in at least half an hour before you go on air. Not always, but typically you would. So I would hope to see them by that point. I would hope to have read them all by the time we get on air. But what I may have read at half an hour beforehand and what I actually read on air quite often is different. Often there's a need to ad-lib as well. And it's part of my role is to keep across everything so that I do have to ad-lib, then I can make some sort of coherent sense. But half an hour, ideally. A lot of people ask about the protocol of writing scripts. Differs at different organisations. At STV, it's typically the reporter will write the introduction first. And I would contend that your introductory paragraph should be the first paragraph of your report. And then you just lop it off, and that's the intro to the piece. Not everyone does that. ITN, for example, I don't think the reporter writes the intro. So the piece just is an entity in its own, and then there's an introduction written above it. For us, typically the reporter will write it. I'll change it to suit style or for whatever reason, and the producer and I work in that. The final call is the producers, but that tends to be the way it works. Reporter, me, producer checks, and then we crack on. But always do read stuff before you go on air. If you read it blind, then you really are going to get caught out. We yesterday had, what was it? It's about anyone saw the walrus in Orkney, in North Ronaldsay? An island used to seaweed-eating sheep. So how would you read that? Well, if you read that blind, what is that? Is that the seaweed's eating the sheep, or the sheep eats the seaweed? So you want to see it beforehand. Top anchormen would recognise that clearly, but you all think I'm an arrogant git. I keep putting these lines out, and it's just dead. So I'll leave the anchorman stuff alone. Okay, I'll not mention any more of that.
What are the main attributes that anyone who works at STV needs to have, and why should they support you?
I give you one example. We got a lad who just started, Peter Smith, who's been with us just over a year. And what he has got is in curiosity, energy, constantly trying to pursue stories. Will proffer ideas. He won't sit quietly. Don't sit quietly. I mean, I know you may be embarrassed getting into organisations, but don't sit quietly. Don't be a pain either, but express views, back them up. But make your voice heard because, and he has done, in the right way. And a lot of the ideas that we do in Scotland Tonight come from him. And certainly pursuit of a lot of the guests we get come from him. Now, this is a guy who's only been in the profession 18 months, not even 18 months. The key to all of us as journalists is curiosity. You've got to be curious. And then back that up with energy. And don't be shy. You can't be shy. You'll see blushing violets in the newsroom fairly often, and who are there for work experience. And that's not going to get you anywhere. If you want to do this, then you've got to be... I mean, what I do, for example, it's an alter ego that's on screen. It's somebody who's a kind of slightly larger than the real life character, and that's what you got to be as a journalist as well. If you just sit there quietly, and once you moved into a newsroom, think of what's got you there. What got you there in the first place? It was energy, it was drive, it was commitment. Well, keep that when you move into the newsroom itself. That's essentially it.
You talked a little bit about when you start documenting through sport.
Yeah.
In this day and age, the way the industry's going, it's important for journalists that they're not just going to be wanting to do one thing, but be open to covering a range of stories.
I think it is, as much as anything else, because I don't think you're going to have a job for life anymore. You know, it used to be guys would become sports correspondents and that would be them for their entire career. They'd become columnists. I'm not convinced that's the way it is anymore. I think adaptability in the subjects you cover, but also adaptability in the skills you have, as we were seeing earlier. And for example, in Scotland we do an awful lot of football, clearly, not just in sport, but in news as well. And a lot of people who put these bulletins together really aren't interested in sport, but they know it. They know about the football. They know the teams that are important. They know how the scores matter. They know who's top of the table, all the rest of it, even though they themselves wouldn't follow any team, could care less about football. But you have to have that knowledge. So, yeah, and it's not just sport, it's politics, particularly now it's politics, and various other issues. Have a broad range of things. However, Pete, the boy I was talking about, he did say, when I was asking him about ways to get into the industry, blog a lot, and particularly blog on a subject that you're a specialist knowledge on, you might bring something new to. Our news editor will say to you that anybody who's applying for a job, if he's looking at all the CVs, and he clearly gets lots of them, it's not the education that he looks at, because there's an assumption that everyone has reached a certain standard. It's what you've done beyond that, and that's the key. Blogging in a particular specialist subject. But when you go in for your interview, having a broad knowledge of various things. It's incredible people who don't know, who the Deputy First Minister is, for example, or who the Finance Secretary is. You need to know stuff like that, even if you're not interested. Have I bored you all to death?
Last couple of questions.
Would you like to have an algorithm of someone specific?
What are you saying? A Veronica Corningstone? Well, I did for a long time. I had several. Over the years. No, but co-anchors. Yeah, I had a lot of people. For most of my career, it actually has been co-anchoring. To the extent that this is quite unusual for me to be a focus, because I always worked with very glamorous women, Shireen Nanjiani, Sarah Heaney, and Andrea Breimer, and various ones like that. And I was basically their lurking bodyguard, essentially. Nobody paid you any mind. It was very much the glamour of the women. What dual presentation gives you is it gives you chemistry, it gives you interaction, it gives you light and shade. But it's also, I think it's a bit hammy at times. It's one of the most uncomfortable things is when you're co-presenting and your co-presenter is reading. What do? Do you look at the camera? Do you look at them? That's fascinating. For me, I prefer doing it on my own. But styles change, and I've been sitting down behind a desk. I've been standing up. I've been sitting on a bench with no desk. It just things go round and round. So I wouldn't be surprised at some point in the future that there'd be another a Veronica. Three, with cheese and pepper. No, don't. Actually, don't. You'll be that would cause you severe trouble. It used to be. There was a serious drinking culture in our profession a long time ago. It doesn't really exist anymore. Certainly not in broadcasting. Or if it does, it's disguised very well. But it used to be then that, for example, very briefly on TV news, typically you recorded on film. That film had to be processed, so your filming was essentially finished at 4 o'clock. That was you. Program wasn't on until 6, half 6, so the rest of the day was your own. Well, now you can be broadcasting online, you can be broadcasting at various points during the day. You can't really do the whole 3 Scotch trick. Bear in mind, Ron Burgundy was 1970s, which was a different world. One we miss.
Have you ever been asked to do any of his famous lines?
Yeah, but see, I just wouldn't sound the same. You know, I wouldn't be able to carry it off. I'm not Ron Burgundy. Not even Anchorman, really. But that's what I mean, the distinction between the on-air persona and the online. Online, you can be anyone you want. And the amount of bull that you get, well, you issue as well, but the amount of bull you get back. Let's give you an example of online. This is astonishing. This tells you everything you need to know about tweeting. One day last week, in the space of an hour, I got 4 tweets from an individual, and I wasn't even online, so I had no idea this individual was tweeting me. I'm John Mackay. This is the STV News. You're great. Second, I think you're the greatest. Please follow me. Third tweet, please follow me. Fourth tweet, I haven't even interacted with this individual. Fourth tweet, you're a dickhead. You know, so what you are online is completely different from reality for all of us. Well, yes and no. I mean, it's not that intrusive, to be honest, and people are by and large polite and all the rest of it. It's also a pain in the ass, to be honest. I mean, you could do without it. You know, the first wee while it happens, it's clearly an ego boost, and that's great. But very quickly that gets a bit tedious. But my experience is, by and large, people are very polite, and that's fine. And you know, they watch your program, so you know, credit to them and show them the respect for that. The sports boys occasionally get a wee bit harder, as you might expect. You know, and they would maybe a bit more abuse, but the abuse, you get a lot of abuse on Twitter, but you don't get a lot of abuse on person, if that's the distinction I would make. Twitter is a great thing in many ways. It's a great journalistic tool, as long as you're cautious with it. It gives you heads up on stories very quickly, but you still need to do the journalistic checks to make sure that you know, you're not being sold a pup. But it gives you that head up far quicker than it used to. But in terms of debate, and I've noticed this in Scotland tonight a lot, in terms of actual debate, Twitter isn't great, I don't think. You get these nutters. They tend to write in capital letters. They tend to not have names. You know, they've got made up names with strange avatars, and they tweet each other all the time. And I think it's crippling debate a wee bit. But so it's a great tool, but don't rely on it overly. Anyone else? Come on. Say again? Get it on time. If you've got if you're asked for a 3-minute piece on the hour, don't provide a well-crafted 3.5-minute piece 2 minutes after the hour. Just, you know your deadline. Whatever it is you've got, put that on air. Forget about, just this wee bit, I'm just going to add this wee bit. That happens too often. Don't do that. And preparation. I've produced STV News quite often, not so much now, but I used to do it quite a lot, and preparation is the key. It means if you get everything in place, something late happens, something goes awry, then you have a plan in place to cover it all. So don't buy anything from anybody who says, oh, well, you know. I'll give you an example. I used to be driving back, and you'd be coming over the Kingston Bridge, and the cameraman would be trying to get through and all the rest of it, and it's 5:45, and you've got to get that picture back, and the Kingston Bridge is not moving. And you phone the news editor, I hear what you're saying, son, but I need those pictures. I don't care. I don't want to hear your problems. Get me the pictures here on time. So that's it. Don't, if planning, have standbys if something's live in case it goes down, and make sure people make their hit time. That's key. And that's quite a common one. Don't give us a 3.5-minute crafted piece when I ask for a 2-minute piece at a certain time. You're looking around, are people guilty of that? I'm sure they are. Just very finally, I hope I haven't bored you to death. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. This is a great profession, absolutely great profession. I've been in it now for a considerable period of time. I look forward to getting into my work on a daily basis. There are people I've worked with that I went to school with who just have never had that. So you've made a great choice in coming here. It's maybe not the most lucrative, but when you look back, you'll have done things you never expected to do, be places you never expected to be, meet people you never expected to meet. It's a cracking career, so good luck with it. If anyone's got any other questions before I go out, then grab me at the door. The key thing that a lot of people hear, these people I was asking incidentally, was that I made mention of it. Do email. It's easier for you guys now than it used to be. Do email journalists you respect, journalists whose style you like, seeking advice. Don't be concerned about that. They may not be the fastest at getting back to you, but by and large they all will. Okay.